Hey guys, in this video I'll show you all 5-piece item sets that are useful for tanking in ESO, for both dungeons and trials. They're all going to be organized in two categories, essential and situational. Situational sets aren't necessarily weaker, you're just less likely to be in a situation where you can use them. Take Olorim for example. It's an extremely powerful set, but there's no point in using it when you have a healer with you. The list is also already on my website, so if you prefer a written version, just go there and read it instead. The website also already has monster sets, mythics and weapon sets, on top of the 5-piece sets that I'm going to cover in this video. So, let's begin. Starting off with the essential category, we have Pearlescent Ward. Pearlescent Ward provides a unique 180 weapon and spell damage buff to you and your allies within 28 meters, when all of your group members are alive, which transforms into up to 66% damage reduction as they start dying. This 180 weapon and spell damage translates into roughly a 2.4% damage increase. When 6 people are dead in a 12-man group, Pearlescent is providing 90 weapon and spell damage and 33% damage reduction to you and all of your allies within 28 meters. When 11 people are dead, it provides 15 weapon and spell damage and 60.5% damage reduction, which is massively helpful. Pearlescent is extremely good because it allows you to recover from situations which would have been a group wipe without Pearlescent. As more people start dying, everyone gets increasing damage reduction, which allows them to survive while resurrecting those dead teammates. The last person alive gets a 60.5% damage reduction, which can allow them to finish the resurrection channel, while being battered by the boss and all the adds. It also continues to work if you die yourself. People within 28 meters of your corpse will continue to gain the benefits of Pearlescent Ward, which will make it easier for them to resurrect you. With all that said, Pearlescent is still worth it using even if you're going for trifecta achievements, because the 180 weapon and spell damage bonus is unique. Next up we have Turning Tide. Turning Tide allows you to apply Major Vulnerability for 10 seconds to enemies in front of you after you block an attack. Major Vulnerability increases enemies' damage taken by 10%, and the only two other reliable sources of it are Archdruid Deverick monster set and Necromancer's Glacial Colossus ultimate. The set has a cooldown of 15 seconds, so theoretically, you can provide up to 67% uptime of Major Vulnerability with just that. Major Vulnerability is additive with Minor Vulnerability, so in practice it ends up being a 9.5% damage increase. So with the theoretical maximum uptime of 67%, we can say that Turning Tide increases damage by 6.4%. This set can be useful in so many places, especially if you don't have a Necromancer in your group to provide the Glacial Colossus ultimate. It's very good in dungeons, it's also very convenient to use for trial trash packs, as the cooldown lines up in a way that it's always ready for the next trash pack. A Necromancer usually won't be able to generate enough ultimate to have Glacial Colossus ready for every trash. Archdruid on the other hand is extremely buggy and has trouble hitting moving targets, so it's very unreliable in trash. Turning Tide can also be used in trial boss fights, although there we have many options because we have the Turning Tide, Archdruid Deverick, Glacial Colossus and Nazari to play with. So a 5-piece set like the Turning Tide usually gets left out. Of course it isn't as simple as that. Turning Tide can still be useful depending on the rest of your team comp and the nature of the fight. For example, these long-lasting major vulnerability tools like Glacial Colossus or Nazari are perfect for static fights with a single enemy, but they aren't ideal when a fight has a constant influx of new enemies, for example Flame Herald Bassei, and the constantly spawning new abominations and behemoths. In such fights, Turning Tide with its shorter duration is still a superior option, because it can be applied constantly to the newly spawned enemies. Next up we have Powerful Assault. Powerful Assault grants a unique 307 weapon and spell damage buff to 6 people within 12 meters for 15 seconds, whenever you cast an Assault ability. It translates to roughly 4.6% damage increase. Most of the time, you'll be proccing it with Resolving Vigor, but Charging Maneuver and Aggressive Horn will also occasionally activate it. It is also sometimes being used by healers instead. Next we have Crimson Oath's Rife. It applies a 3541 armor penetration debuff, which translates to roughly 8% damage increase, if all of that penetration was actually needed. PvE enemies have 18,200 armor, and there's tons of different sources of armor penetration, which is why being able to tell if Crimson Oath is actually needed is quite hard. It is never the ideal option, as in dungeons it's more efficient to have your damage dealers alter their builds and bring additional penetration on their own, for example by using more light armor pieces to trigger the concentration passive, using 1-piece monster sets with penetration, such as Vulcan Scoria, or being a class with penetration passives, such as Arcanists with their Splintered Secrets. And in trials, it's better to have a damage dealer using the Alkosh item set. But it's a great option for random groups, because you can't guarantee what builds your random teammates are going to use. And armor penetration is extremely potent when there is armor left to be penetrated, which is why I recommend using Crimson Oath in pack trials, unless you know for sure that some damage dealer is going to use Alkosh. Another interesting aspect of Crimson Oath is that it has 2 bonus armor lines, so it ends up granting us additional 2974 armor, which can be very useful, especially if you're not a Nord. Next up we have Saxhley's Champion. Saxhley provides major force to you and your teammates within 28 meters for 1 second per 15 ultimate spent, whenever you use an ultimate. Major force increases critical damage done by 20%, and it can also be applied by their aggressive Horn ultimate for 10 seconds, which is why using it in combination with Saxhley is kind of a waste, but this doesn't mean that you should absolutely never use them together, because sometimes it's still worth it. But because of that, Saxhley works best on Necromancer and Sorcerer tanks, who can pair it with Glacial Colossus or Summon Charge Atronach ultimates respectively. Saxhley can also allow you to use defensive ultimates, such as Replenishing Barrier, Magma Shell, or Gibbering Shelter, without losing that much group DPS. Next up we have Lucent Echoes. Lucent Echoes increase the critical damage and critical healing of your group members within 28 meters by 11%, while your health is above 50%. This translates to roughly a 4.2% damage increase. While your health is below 50%, it instead grants you a 20% damage reduction. Critical damage is capped at 122%, so you won't need Lucent Echoes if there's already a damage dealer in your group using the Elemental Catalyst item set, which provides 15% critical damage. And Khajiits can reach the cap without any of these sets, thanks to their Feline Ambush racial passive. But that was assuming the Major Force buff is up at all times. In less organized groups, Major Force's uptime will be far from 100%, so Lucent Echoes could still be decent for filling in the gaps. Lucent Echoes, however, greatly increases survivability of the tank wearing it, because of the 20% damage reduction below 50% health. So, for more difficult fights, it's worth replacing Elemental Catalyst with it in your team composition, to make the tank's job easier. Now moving on to the situational category, and first we have Vestments of Olorim. Olorim places a circle on the ground for 5 seconds whenever you cast a ground ability, with a cooldown of 10 seconds. Allies standing in the circle gain Major Courage for 20 seconds, which increases weapon and spell damage by 430, which is roughly a 6.5% damage increase. It's a very big increase that outshines other sets, but the reason it's not in the essential category is because applying Major Courage is a healer's job, and they'll be doing that with either Olorim itself or Spell Power Cure. Because of that, Olorim is the best set to run when playing without a healer in dungeons, in a 1 tank, 3 damage dealers group composition. War Machine provides Major Slayer to up to 6 allies within 28 meters, prioritizing closest allies, for 1 second per 10 ultimate spent whenever you use an ultimate. Major Slayer increases damage done to monsters inside trials, dungeons, and arenas by 10%. The same buff can be applied by the Roaring Opportunist set, which is commonly used by healers in trials. But War Machine has the potential to provide better uptime, as long as your team can properly split into 2 groups and stay organized, because War Machine applies to 6 closest allies. In dungeons, War Machine is straight up better. It's also commonly used by damage dealers, as they can use it without losing that much DPS, because it's a medium set with decent stat lines. And next we have Elemental Catalyst. Elemental Catalyst applies debuffs that increase enemies' critical damage taken by up to 15%. Whenever you deal Flame, Shock, or Frost damage, you apply Flame, Shock, or Frost weakness to the enemy for 3 seconds. Each elemental weakness increases their critical damage taken by 5%. It's a crucial set overall, but it's rarely used on tanks. Most of the time it's being used by Necromancer damage dealers, as they have the easiest access to all elemental damage types. They can keep up Shock weakness with Mystic Siphon, Frost weakness with Unnerving Boneyard, and Flame weakness with Elemental Blockade with an Inferno Staff. Sometimes, however, it makes sense to use it on a tank. In Asylum Sanctorium, the main tank is in a perfect position to utilize it, while at the same time, you don't want to bring a Necromancer damage dealer, because they're performing badly in that fight. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below, or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.